Welcome to the CSSJ Podcast. I'm Jonah Lenahan, CSSJ student intern and resident appreciator of Impressionist art. I couldn't tell you what that is, but it just sounds really appealing to me.
And I'm Leslie Mazzino, CSSJ student intern and resident Chicago rat hole lover. Long live the rat hole.
We have a great episode today, Dickinson. We're joined by Antonia Benson and Azaf Shah.
Whoa, Anna, back up. Jonah and I are the hosts, not you.
I asked Jonah for a segment on your silly little podcast, and I'm here. Is this not my segment, Leslie?
No, this is the intro. It's obviously not specifically for you, Anna. Why would the intro be your personal segment?
She interpreted introduction to mean introducing Anna, and I didn't have the heart to tell her it's more of a general thing that the hosts do to start the show.
Oh, I see.
Jonah Lenahan, you puny, wacky, gawky man, why can't you just tell me things? Am I really that intimidating to you? Can we not get over our little squabble by now? I'm serious. This doesn't have to be a thing at all on the podcast, but it seems like you're making it a thing, and I'm not very comfortable or happy with that.
I understand that, Anna. It's just
what, man?
The podcast is kind of my brainchild, you know. It's my little CSSJ baby, and I don't like it when other people get their grubby hands all over her.
Gendering the podcast is wild and so problematic, and we can talk about that later, but Jonah, you biblically named, innocent-eyed, meek, scrawny-armed notes app poet, I would not dream of taking custody of your bizarre podcast baby.
That's such a relief. You have no idea how terrified I was.
Okay, whatever. So I can come back later for my segment.
Yes, please do. We'll see you soon. Thanks for stopping by, Anna. Please tell me you have your segment done, Jonah.
Molly!
Jonah, right here, sorry.
Why are you apologizing? Why is half of the staff so thin-skinned?
So I did live in France for a semester.
Molly Gunn, my friend, my coworker. Can you do your correspondent piece right now? Not that I need the time to write a segment or anything, just because I really need to hear about these campus events.
Tonight at 4:45 p.m., the Advising Internship and Career Center will host a public service careers workshop in Biddle House. The goal of this brief meeting, open to all students, will be to explain the intricacies of government employment to those of us curious about how to get involved as a public servant after college.
Molly, I am so excited for this. Did you see the Engaged page? We're going to explore the government employment site USA Jobs. That's a gold mine, Molly. That is my Ark of the Covenant. I cannot believe we have such an opportunity.
Yeah, I gotta be honest, guys. I only clicked on this Engaged because of the clip art illustration of the dog in Washington, D.C. This little orange dog walking on a leash in front of the Capitol. He's adorable. I don't know what breed he is, but I just want to scoop him up and cuddle him.
Yeah, Leslie, as a poli-sci major, I gotta agree with Molly. The puppy is a major draw.
So this is how democracy dies, to fur and kisses.
On March 6th, tomorrow, the Pre-Health Society will be bringing Dr. Paul Kanev to campus for a talk at Stafford Auditorium. A member of the class of 1975, Kanev has had an impressive career as a pediatric neurosurgeon. Kanev is only 2 years ahead of President Johnny Jones. Some would say that caring for children with serious disabilities and illness is a more fulfilling role than that of a college president.
Hey, I'd be willing to bet that Dr. Kanev doesn't have a personal stylist, so ask yourself, who's the real winner here?
I cannot wait for you two to come back to campus in 50 years so measly little student workers making a podcast for their office could compare your accomplishments.
You know, Molly, I actually heard that he studied French and creative writing in undergrad.
Really?
No, absolutely not.
That was not nice of you at all. Keep studying QAnon and see if that lands you in a fancy hospital residency.
Hey, no matter where we end up, we know our Dickinson education will provide us at least one thing.
Right, a personal stylist.
I was gonna say a rich and critical worldview, Leslie.
Yeah, well, go on dressing like that and see where your liberal arts brain gets you.
Oh no. This next thing feels like a Jonah thing, and that scares me. The three main campus Christian groups, DCF, DCCM, and OCF, will be jointly hosting their third campus-wide gathering tomorrow night in Allison Hall, this time observing the season of Lent. Now, I'm no expert, but as I understand it, Lent is all about giving up. The time of the year when Christians give up on their goals, their jobs, physical fitness, what have you. Basically, this is a time of relaxation and laziness for Christians all over the world.
No, Molly, that's not what Lent is about at all.
I knew he wouldn't be able to resist.
Lent is absolutely not a season for hibernation and forgetting about discipline and faith practice. It's kind of the opposite of that.
Okay, mister. Then explain to me why people are always talking about what they're giving up for Lent.
Giving up like sacrificing, like fasting from. Lent is a time when Christians contemplate our own sinfulness and failings and meditate on the life teachings and the ministry of Jesus.
Okay, you're losing me. Christian holidays are usually all about stories, right? Christmas, Jesus is born and Santa brings him presents. Easter, Jesus dies, but then the giant rainbow egg is rolled away from his tomb and comes back. What's the story here, man?
Molly, please don't let him do this on the podcast. I'm begging you. I can feel myself slipping back into anti-theism in real time.
Okay, Matthew chapter 4. After he was baptized, Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. He fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, and afterwards he was famished. The tempter came and said to him, "If you are the Son of God, command these stones to become loaves of bread." But he answered, "It is written, one does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God." That's what Lent is all about, Molly Gunn.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks.
For entertaining content like this and more, the event is tomorrow at 7:45 p.m. in the Interfaith Chapel. Jonah hopes to see you there.
Finally, on Friday at noon in Stern Center, WGRC will be hosting an alumni panel on health careers in gender, sexuality, and racial inequity. This is the perfect opportunity to hear how the realities of these identities play into the healthcare fields.
Will the alumni take questions, Molly?
I think so. The Engaged page says they will.
Oh, good, because I have this weird thing where I keep going blind when I get stressed.
I think you should make an appointment with a specialist, and probably also a priest or a rabbi or something.
Clergy aren't really my crowd, except maybe Father Ted on a good day.
Actually, yes, speaking of the priesthood, we are just about to be joined for our interview by a Dickinson senior with an interest in just that. She's a leader in Dickinson Christian Fellowship, a friend of mine, religion major, and a deeply kind, caring, and admirable person, Antonia Benson. But before we meet Antonia, I am told we have a message from a sponsor.
Good morning, Professor Shadler and Webb, Jonah's parents, and other imaginary podcast listeners. This is President Katerina Sondrowski and past local news station anchor and correspondent. Yeah, that's right. You are hearing from me for a few reasons today. But this script is so boring, you're not getting any of it. I'll be back for the newsletter review later on in this episode. See you all then. And now, our interview. Leslie, Antonia, have fun, and I'm listening.
With me in the studio today is Antonia Benson, class of 2024, archaeology and religion major, as well as part of the leadership of DCF. Antonia, welcome to the studio.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Would you mind starting by telling us a little bit about yourself, your religious, secular, or spiritual background, your upbringing, your academic interests, whatever you feel is most important for us to know about you?
Sure. I'm a double major in archaeology and religion, particularly with a focus on early Christianity. In the religion side, the archaeology side is Area A, classic stuff. As far as my religious background, I'm an Episcopalian. I'm currently pursuing what's called discernment in the Episcopal Church, which is sort of the process before the process that ultimately leads to ordination. I have a goal of becoming a priest eventually. But I grew up as a Baptist, or sort of more like evangelical with Baptist tendencies. It's messy, complicated. My family jumped around from church to church a lot growing up.
In that vein, would you tell us a little bit more, whatever you're comfortable sharing about that religious background? You know, where you come from, where you are now, what led you away from the church you grew up in and towards where you are now?
So like I said, I sort of grew up in this very evangelical realm, and I wouldn't say it was like hyper-conservative, scary fundamentalists or something. Though there was definitely sort of a vein of, okay, being gay, being queer is bad, that sort of thing. And really, that's where my sort of story breaks off, because I am trans, and yeah, so that sort of created some issues growing up, because it was something where it was not necessarily explicit as like, oh, the pastor's doing his rant on queer people going to hell again this week, because that didn't really happen, but it was more implicit in like the church next door, the one that's kind of gay-friendly, is kind of really too worldly. You really probably shouldn't hang out with them.
So an underlying culture that sort of gets ingrained in your brain, and then the type that sort of sits with you, and then you're like, but is this right? Where it's not explicit, like you said, but it sits with you in the back of your head.
I was maybe not explicitly told, oh, you being trans is a bad thing, but it was something where it's like, okay, by the end of the day, I knew that was true. And that's sort of where my journey, I guess you could say, begins. Realizing that I was trans and couldn't just hide it anymore sort of forced me to reflect and think about religion. I wouldn't say that I lost faith or anything at any point, but I was really struggling with what to do with myself.
Did you have a specific moment that was the catalyst for you, or was it just very gradual? At some point you just sort of realized, I have to make a change here. Or was it one specific instance where you were like, that's it, I have to be me?
I mean, it's not like there's any sort of like revolutionary moment. So there's a certain sense in which it was gradual, but it's like it's gradual to a point, and that point is a point of no return. Like, okay,
Right.
I can't keep suppressing this anymore. And to that end, I sort of reached a point where it's like, okay, this is who I am. This is not going to change. This is not something that I can fix, quote unquote. It's just something that's part of me and that I have to learn to live with. I somehow was created this way. And so that sort of led me on this journey of, I guess, theological development. I sort of start out with a question of, like, okay, I have to believe that the quote-unquote one true church is how I think I framed it at the time. I noticed I was like 13, 14.
Those are big thoughts for a 13-year-old to have, yeah.
Yeah, so I was sort of struggling with that, looking for this like idea of the one true church or whatever that would be like queer friendly. And so it sort of started from a place of, okay, what's like what I've experienced but would accept me? And then from there, I guess my thinking just evolved. At some point, it shifted from looking for, like, the one true church to just wanting to understand, like, the history of religion in general, Christianity specifically, and, like, the theology around LGBT issues, like, the way that Christians of different groups have, like, dealt with that issue and come to terms with it. I mean, that process is kind of what ended up leading me to becoming a religion major, ultimately, though we're still talking, like, years beforehand. As far as that process goes, I mean, it caused me to develop an interest in, like, church history and theology, which ultimately got me interested in learning about things like tradition and those sorts of things, ritual, liturgy. It caused me to really start to develop a value for those things, which is what ultimately led me to the Episcopal Church, because in comparison, the Episcopal Church, like what I'm a part of now, is much more liturgical, much more traditional in a practical sense than the sort of evangelical Baptist background I'm from, despite theologically speaking being, I mean, much more progressive in many ways. I mean, obviously, ordination of women, LGBT people, same-sex marriage, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. So, at some point, you ended up at Dickinson as a religion major. How has your time at Dickinson helped or hindered you in your study of religion, your study of that history, of tradition, of all those things that your background led you to become interested in?
I mean, Dickinson definitely provided an outlet for that. Like, I really value our religion department. Professors here have been really helpful. I love Professor Van, Professor Shadler.
So, any specific classes, or is it like really just getting to work one-on-one with professors and faculty and community members?
You know, I think it's a bit of both. I mean, there's a certain element in which it's like, oh, the classes are interesting, but I've always been the kid who stays after class and talks to the teacher.
It's a good thing to do.
Sort of developed with professors. So I've had sometimes even hour-long conversations with professors just about topics that maybe we did talk about in class, but sort of more broadly. Plus also just social issues, that sort of thing. And they've really helped to facilitate that thinking. I mean, it's something where it's like we're sort of talking about questions that I've already been thinking about for years at this point, but nonetheless, hearing more perspectives. And I think that's really the biggest thing that I have to say about Dickinson is just, my time here has provided so many opportunities to meet people and talk about their perspectives on things, and debate's the wrong word, but discuss issues and topics and belief systems. Because, I mean, there are so many people with so many diverse backgrounds. Even when we're talking within religious communities here on campus, or the religion major, for example. The religion major, there's people of every religious background in the major. Even in the religious communities, I'm in the leadership team for DCF, and, we're talking about a group that is marginally evangelical, technically speaking, because it's, associated with InterVarsity, but in practice is incredibly diverse. I'm not an evangelical, but there's people in DCF who are Orthodox Christians, there's non-denominational, there's Baptist, Presbyterian. It's a very diverse group.
How did you get involved with DCF? How did you become a leader with DCF? And how do you handle that diversity of Christian thought within the group, within Bible study and Revive and other activities, but also just in deciding which events to hold, what to do, what to talk about?
Part of it, I think, as far as deciding events and things, is we sort of do have a at this point, sort of a tradition, I guess you could say, as far as like how DCF operates. Like, we always have Bible studies. We always have Revive. The short answer is that it's a very group collaborative sort of dynamic. You know, the group is very communal. Like, we're all genuinely friends in like our day-to-day lives, so we like hang out together and that sort of thing. It sort of breaks down a lot of those barriers and stereotypes that might otherwise be there. You know, because I come from a background where, if I'm honest, I kind of have a lot of discomfort around a lot of very evangelical stuff because I grew up around it and was not exactly impressed, putting it mildly. And yet I have close friends in DCF who are highly involved in their sort of evangelical churches and backgrounds and really appreciative of it. And, you know, we get along because we can look past labels and assumptions and actually, like, we're friends, we know each other. That sort of is a big piece of it, I think. And it's something that I find just really special. I don't think I've ever really encountered another group that's quite like that.
I have always felt so welcome at DCF events, and I just love them. I think it's such a nice group of people who are so excited to just be there and be friendly and be welcoming.
Well, because ultimately I don't think it's about theology per se, so much as being in community with one another.
Yeah.
Is sort of the central goal of DCF. So, you know, you have people there who have very different theologies. I mean, we've got at least one member who's Mormon, and we've got members who are, you know, Orthodox and Catholic and
Well, that
Protestant.
one member happened to be Ben Lundy
Yes.
of CSSJ Podcast Episode 4 fame.
Yes.
Switching gears a little bit, will you talk a little bit about your involvement at St. John's and how that's impacted your college experience? What that looks like for you, what you do, what it means to you?
Yeah, so for reference, St. John's is the Episcopal Church here in Carlisle, which I'm a member of. As far as like how it's impacted my college experience, I mean, I almost want to say like not much, in that it's like, you know, I go to church on Sunday and I'm involved in a couple activities. I mean, I serve as a chalice bearer, which means I serve the wine in communion, and I'm an usher. So I'm involved in church life, which is incredible to me because, like, growing up, the idea that someone like me could even dare to be involved in church life was unthinkable. But the church that I'm in just sort of accepted, and as probably their most consistent college student, I'm kind of valued a bit, which is weird to think about. Apart from that, I mean, like I said, it's called discernment, with the intent of hopefully pursuing ordination in the future. And so that means, like, I have been, you know, in contact with the bishop of our diocese. Like, actually, just this past Sunday, we took a trip to a local church, or I say local, it was Lewistown, St. Mark's Church there, I think. And so I got to hang out with a bishop for like 5 hours. And
So fun.
Yes.
Well, stressful, but still fun at the end of the
it
day.
was fun.
Good.
It was really fun. I mean, you think it would be stressful, but then it's like she's just a person. So,
Right, yeah.
you know, you get to chat about church theology, and we chatted about like society and social dynamics.
Which I could guess is probably right up your alley.
Definitely, yes.
So what does that long-term process look like for you? What's the timeline?
In part, it's kind of flexible. It can really vary from person to person. You know, if I fast track it, maybe a couple months before, like, then like a couple years long process of seminary, to perhaps even the like pre-seminary process taking a couple of years. Because the point is really to serve as a process to help you reflect on where you're being called as far as like your life and your goals, hence the term discernment. And so that looks different for different people. In practice, where I am right now, I've made a process where I'm meeting with what's called a discernment committee, which is members of my local church, the local parish, to just sort of reflect on that sort of more specifically and more intentionally. My intention or, you know, goal is that process is going to be through in April, and then move on to sort of the next step, which is one like a long line, but essentially from the discernment committee it goes to the sort of the vestry, and with the vestry, which is the governing council of the church, the elected members of the church parish that represent it, and they sort of make a sort of a final reflection on the process, and then that goes sort of back up to the diocesan level to continue on with a few steps of various committees. And then ultimately, sort of the bishop is the final voice on that. though through the whole process I'm sort of keeping in touch with everyone at all the levels in some sense.
Wow, that's so exciting. I have two kind of closing questions. They are questions, but they're sort of more reflections in a way. The first one I have is, do you have a sort of message for future post-discernment Antonia that you would perhaps like to leave here in the immortality of the internet and the immortality of this podcast?
Oh dear.
Something where if you happen to stumble across it in, 20 years.
My message for sort of my future self, I guess, would just be not to forget where you're coming from, not to forget the sort of sense of community and diversity in community that is special here at Dickinson. There is something like really special about being in this community where, sure, you can have disagreements and stuff, but still be collaborative and still be friends. That I found has been like a key part of my experience while here at Dickinson. We're both religion majors and we get along, but we have very different theological views, and that's okay. And that's a good thing, actually, because I think having that diversity is a good thing. And I think, not to say agree to disagree, but like working collaboratively despite disagreement is a big part of what I think is important and what I would like to hold on to for myself.
The world would be a lot more boring if we all thought the same thing.
Definitely.
That's what makes this interesting. My second closing question / reflection is, do you have any advice or comfort that you would give to people who carry trauma from churches that did not accept them, people who maybe haven't reached the point yet, like you have in your journey, of saying, I found my place, or I think I found my place at the very least?
That's a place that it's hard to be in. Trust me, I know that it's like, I remember being in that place where I was like feeling really wrapped up with anger and frustration and a sense of grief and loneliness. And it's a really tough place to be in. And I'll be honest, I don't know if there's anything I can particularly say that's going to like make someone else who's in that place, or that would have made like me when I was in that place, feel better or something, like fix all your problems per se. But I do think that my simple answer would just be to know that you don't have to stay there in that place, and to know that there's an entire world out here to find that can help you with that healing. When it comes to religion in particular, which I think is a big piece of this, at least it was for me, it's so incredibly diverse, and you can find your place, you can find your niche, you can find something that works, and I don't know what that will look like. It varies from person to person. For me, found this somehow quirkily progressive yet traditional church denomination of, I want to say we're like maybe 1 million people. For other people, I don't know what that looks like. If it's atheism, it's atheism. If it's Buddhism, it's Buddhism. If it's Taoism, it's Taoism. I know we had Ezra on. Mm-hmm. It varies. It can be a lot of different things, but just know that it's out there. Ultimately, know that you're not alone and that there are people who can support you and will support you. And if you're struggling with big questions about religion in connection to a feeling of loss or abandonment or suffering as a result of religious trauma, religious bigotry, that sort of thing, take a class in religion. I guess I'll close with that.
It's worked for a lot of us.
Yeah, say, I guess we can do a more stumping for religion department again, but yeah.
If you know more about it, it's not so scary.
Definitely.
That's the message. Thank you so much for joining us today. This was a wonderful interview. You are such a profound person, and I could listen to you talk all day. We said that about Father Ted, and I'll say it about you. I'm putting that out there. So thank you so much, and best of luck with your discernment. Best of luck with your semester, and we can't wait to talk to you again at some point.
Thank you. I'm glad to have been here.
All right, everybody, I'm back. I'm going to be reviewing Molly's delightful newsletter, and honestly, it was delightful. Especially because the overall message was kind of to realize the beauty in everything and stay positive, especially in times that might make it a little hard to stay positive. And being a graduating senior, I really am starting to find the value in the environment I'm in. Because it's one thing to look around the world that you live in and to see all this beauty that you might take for granted for a while. But at the end of this newsletter, I kind of realized, like, yes, there is a point in our lives where we do need to stop and look around and realize the world that we're in, and realize in a way how lucky we are to even be here, and to be as privileged and present as we really are. Especially on this campus where we are surrounded with beauty and we're surrounded with individuals who half of them will never speak to or ever see. But at the end of the day, we can take the moments that we walk around this campus and the experiences that we have, and we can keep with them forever. Because as a senior, again, being here for 4 years, half of my time, I could say, was very tumultuous or, in a way, terrible. And, you know, there was a lot of heartbreak, a lot of heartache, and also just understanding that people sometimes are really out to get you in a way. And after everything, you know, you have to kind of take the positives out from it and realize that, yeah, some stuff has happened. And yeah, there's a lot of bad things in this world in a way. But look at how all of those little things led up to the person that I am today. And how can we take all of this bad and create it into something good? And how can we take the memories that we've created and also just the experiences that we had as individuals living in a world full of hatred and kind of disgrace? And how can we turn that into something positive, especially on the campus and the environment that we're in? And Molly's newsletter article really stood out because she's kind of taking the little things and not taking them for granted. She's using them to the best of her ability, and she's working in a way that she's making her life peaceful and pleasant for herself. And I think that's a major lesson for us to learn, especially here at Dickinson, where all of us are running around, where we're doing a million different things. Many of us are spread really, really thin. And then on top of that, we have extreme and harsh academic standards to meet, while also trying to have a social life and trying to be happy with everything. But overall, I think that we need to take those little moments, the 2 seconds of relaxation or your nightly routine, and look at how we can place ourselves, relax, and also just understand the world around us and see how we can make most out of it. And also, Dickinson is pretty, so maybe if we just go outside a little, take a deep breath, look at those limestone buildings, maybe have a popsicle or two, things could be good.
The first and last newsletter review of Katerina Swandrowski. I'm so proud of her for doing it and so happy I was here to witness it. Hey, Molly, where did Jonah go?
I don't know. He's probably off looking for a friend or something. Great interview, by the way.
Thanks. I'm worried about Jonah, though. A friend? I have a hard time believing that.
No, yeah, honestly, me too.
I think it's pretty obvious what's happening here, guys. Jonah is running away from me because he hasn't written my segment yet.
I'm sure that's not what's happening, Anna. You can relax. Your segment's coming up soon.
That lousy little Lutheran thinks he can scamper off with my special podcast segment, huh? Thinks he can avoid the president of Pagan Q? Thinks he can trick his coworkers? Wherever he is, I'm going to find him and make him write me something, and it had better be hilarious.
Can I come back yet?
Yes, the coast is clear. Did you find your friend?
The friend was real?
I have plenty of imaginary friends, but this isn't one. Let's meet him.
Your call has been forwarded to an automatic voice message system. At the tone, please record your message. When you have finished recording, you may hang up or press 1 for more options.
Hey, Leslie, I'm at the Underground with Azaf. We're waiting on you to do the interview. I'm sorry if there was confusion about the day or something. Just let me know if we have to call off for today, or if you could just, give me some information about Audacity so I can get into that and we can start recording. That would be great. And if you're on your way, let me know. Thanks, Leslie. Bye-bye.
I'm joined now by a dear friend of mine for our alt segment, our Jaunt with Jonah for today. Azaf Shah is here with us. Azaf, welcome.
Thank you, Jonah. Thank you for having me here.
Azaf, I'm very, very excited about our interview today because, as many people may not know, you were part of the impetus for starting this podcast. Do you remember that conversation?
I do. I think so. We're outside at the porch at the
We
CSSJ.
were, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a warm day, and we had a really great conversation. It was strange because I've known you, Azaf, since I got here in the fall, and we've been sort of in the same friend group since then. And you asked if we could have a meeting, which was a very strange moment because I remember you coming up to me and you said, Jonah, I want to meet with you at the CSSJ because I have some stuff I want to talk about. And it was a strange moment, but I'm glad we had that moment because it led to a meeting where we got into a whole wide-ranging conversation about the need for students to express themselves on campus outside of existing religious groups.
Yep.
And that was the need that you expressed, and that is what got us to the podcast. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Jenna, for starting it. That was the ultimate purpose of that conversation, I guess. Or, there are many other things you can do, but I think so this is a great starting point for beginning the conversation, at least.
Yeah, and I think we're trying to get more and more creative with how we do the podcast and who can participate and in what way. And so I'm very glad that you're joining us for this short interview. We like to start every interview on the podcast by asking where our guests are coming from as far as their religious identity and maybe how they've grown and changed in that since they came to Dickinson.
So firstly, I'll start by saying that I'm from Kashmir, which is a region of dispute between India and Pakistan, and the majority of the population there is Muslim. And as a result of that, and I'm Muslim as well, but I lived in an environment that was overtly Muslim in terms of expression, in terms of everything that was around me. There were mosques. There have been the call to prayer at all times of day and the 5 times that are prescribed and coming from different places. So I was coming from an environment that was very strongly attached to their faith and their faith system, and that intersected with my culture as well. And I've had a fairly decent, I would say even strong relationship with my faith when I was back home. But as soon as I came to the U.S., it really kind of dawned upon me that how I express my faith or how I practice my faith will really change when I'm here. And that is not necessarily to do with the fact I'm in America or that I'm in college, but I would just say it was a moment where I realized I have to adapt to already a lot of things, and I think so that put strain on how I wanted to go about my faith here. I had to think about academics, all the administrative and legal kind of processes that I had to do here, focus on making friends, ultimately. And I think so that kind of distracted me for a while from my faith or kind of took me a step away from it. But yeah, I feel it's going on a steady path now. I've learned to kind of cope with it within this environment and kind of focus on it the best I can at this moment.
You and I spoke earlier about being on a process of growth and learning, right? And that's something we're both on, despite being in different faith traditions.
Yeah.
And it's admirable to see you figuring out how to adapt in your faith and your practice, despite being in an environment that maybe isn't quite as conducive to regular practice.
Very fair, yeah.
Or to practice the way that you did growing up. As an international student, I'm sure you've had a lot of observations about American culture and campus culture. This is also something I know that we've had fun conversations about. But in what ways have the religious and spiritual dynamics here at Dickinson and in this country generally surprised you?
So broadly, there are 2 main things that have surprised me. First is the acceptance of diversity of faith, whether that be within different religious traditions or that is within those groupings themselves as well. So I'm grateful that this country, or rather this campus, has created an environment where people from various faith traditions or people who do not have any faith or religious belief or have different kinds of interpretations of that are able to aptly express that and not get backlash to a certain extent about that. But at the same time, the other kind of contrasting aspect of this is there are many people I met here who are unsure of their faith or have no faith system as such in a higher power or any sort of religious system or kind of denomination. And that really surprised me because I've never seen people without religion. I've never seen people without faith. And it took me a while to kind of grasp that reality wherein there are people who do not have like someone to kind of pray to or someone to ask for help, like something higher than themselves, something in the vein of divinity. And so these contrasting things really summarized America for me, that there is diversity of faith and there's also a lack of that at the same time, in the sense that people have a less acceptance of religious systems, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, I think that absolutely makes sense. That's something that I can only imagine what it must have felt like to be confronted with that for the first time. I know that the place that I come from and the family that I come from is a place of faith and religious practice, but I always knew kids growing up who didn't have that, and you adapt to that as a kid growing up and saying, you know what, I go to church, but my friend doesn't go to church, right? And that's just what it is. Or my friend is Jewish instead, right? Or whatever it might be. But yeah, I can imagine how shocking that must have been for you. Do you find it hard to have conversations about your religious belief or about your faith journey generally with people who not only come from a different tradition, but maybe come from no tradition?
More or less, I've found people to be quite open to hearing my story or my journey with my faith and the various aspects of our religion. But at the same time, I have felt that when you kind of express your sentiment, your opinion about that, I get resistance from people because they feel that I'm coming from a perspective that wants to change their mind or kind of change how they think or deal with their faith. But that's never my intent. My intent is just explaining my system, my idea, and my faith to them. I do not want to put a burden on them of my faith or my religion, but I want them to kind of understand it and have a general kind of sense of what it is. But many a times I've seen this, and I've been taken aback by that fact. People think I'm coming within more like a missionary kind of approach or an approach where I want to change things or change their mindset. And they feel like that, and I feel very bad afterwards because I shared something that was from my heart, that's something very close to me, and that's how it was seen. And I do not begrudge such people or anyone who kind of engaged in such a manner, but I always have this in the back of my mind, and maybe I would not want to express myself thereafter.
Yeah, it's an uncomfortable feeling. I agree, and this has happened to me too. Especially coming as a pastor's kid, people assume that I'm out trying to get people to go to church, right? Or I'm trying to get people to become Lutherans or Christians more generally. But no, for someone like both of us, where faith has played a major role in our lives and probably will continue to, sometimes we just want to share and we want to express because it's so important. Yeah. And for somebody who maybe doesn't experience that importance in their own life, it's very easy, you can understand, for them to read what we're doing as some kind of missionary activity, which tells you something else about the United States broadly, that there is a lot of that, right? Maybe. There are plenty of people who go around preaching and trying to convince and to sway others. Yeah. But I think it actually can be damaging to people of faith and then people who maybe are atheist or agnostic when that assumption is brought to these open conversations. I want to ask you now about religious life on campus. You are a member and friends with members of MECA, the Muslim Educational and Cultural Association, here at Dickinson, which is a wonderful group. Highly recommend. In what ways, Azaf, do you feel like religious life here at Dickinson needs to improve or change? And you can hit on this however you want, but how do you see yourself or your campus group being a part of that change?
So, firstly, I love MECA, and I appreciate every other also religious kind of student organization or body. But at the same time, I also feel while there are different religious groupings and their respective organizations of campus, I feel there are many people on campus as well who have variations within their faith systems and their traditions and how they kind of look at that. And maybe many a times they do not get the adequate voice or representation they deserve. There are many outliers, like they may be people from one faith system which does not have a body on campus, or they may be within a certain faith tradition, but they're of a certain denomination which is not adequately represented as well. So I feel that is one thing we are lacking in that sense. The outliers remain on the outside, and they're never brought within the grouping or within some kind of fold where they feel supported, where they feel their voices are heard, and where they feel ultimately they have a safe space to express themselves. And on the second hand, the other thing I feel there is a certain gap in is the fact there are these different organizations, but the collaboration between them is missing. Wherein there's MECA, there's DCF, and there are many other groups. And I often feel like there's a need for this unity, or not unity, but rather coming together in sharing of ideas and sharing of opinions and about your faith or whatever you believe in ultimately, and not focusing on the differences, but rather coming together on the common points of our religions or our faiths or whatever we have that means a lot to us, and move on from there in a way that is conducive and also creates an environment where people do not think about, oh, this makes him different than me or this makes them different than me, but rather focuses on, we share this, we appreciate this together, and we are happy that we have these things in common.
I think those are exactly some of the difficulties that we at the CSSJ and I personally have noticed in my time here at Dickinson. And I think it's going to take a lot of effort from students across campus in different groups, outside of groups, to bridge those gaps. And it really is. It's a battle between unity and inclusivity, right? How do we make sure that everybody can participate in religious life? And individuality. How can we make sure people maintain their own beliefs and their own backgrounds and feel like they can express those things without being judged, if you want to call it that, or having someone assume that they're being preached at, you know? How can we balance those things? And it absolutely is the role of the CSSJ to figure that out, but it's also the role of students from the ground up to figure that out. And it's really great to hear you recognize some of that. Something that we often try to do at CSSJ is find students who are in those little outlier pockets and try to connect them together, right? So a perfect example of that was the genesis of Pig and Curious. They're able to form a group together that acknowledges a wide range of diversity, right? There are people in that group who would identify as Celtic pagan, right? My friend Bug Adams. And then there are people in that group who are maybe agnostic, or they don't really know where they fit in, but they're just there to have the community. And so it can be very hard, I think, to find these outlier students. And once you find them, it's very hard to get them to start something, right? And so maybe starting a new group is not always the answer, but then there's the bigger question of how do you integrate into a larger group? Both of us participate in religious groups on campus where I'm a Christian, right? But I'm not Catholic, but I'm in DCCM, and I go to Mass, and I try to participate, and I'm close with people there. How can I express the tradition I come from in a Catholic environment? How can you express the tradition that you come from in a dominantly, frankly, Sunni environment? I don't have answers to those questions.
I feel, so you come from Abrahamic religions, which have various similarities and certain differences. And within our faith traditions, there are different sects and different denominations who believe in more or less some basic principles, but then there are branching out on other ideas and other kind of questions and different tenets of our faith systems. And my personal view on this is that whatever the sectarian denominational differences there are, whether that be Catholic, Protestant, or whether that be in Islam, whether that be Shia or Sunni, I feel in this environment, especially within the U.S., there's a difference because the Christian community in general on the campus is larger, and the various denominations also have a larger grouping within themselves in comparison to, let's say, the Muslim community on campus. And within that Muslim community, because it is in number less, or there are lesser Muslims on campus in general who are not even maybe part of Mecca, and within that environment, to talk about differences or to express differences, while should be legitimate and accepted and be taken in an open mind. But at the same time, I feel it is best to move in a way where you are focusing, or rather only concerned with the things that bring you together rather than things that drive you apart. Because it's very easy in things that you hold close to your heart to be to have very strong opinions about them and then express them as well. And when it is religious differences, I think so they can take a turn which oftentimes goes in a direction which is not very ideal for an inclusive environment, an environment that cherishes the differences, that cherishes acceptance. So I feel, in my case at least, I would not want to focus on things that make me different from people within my faith tradition based on sectarian differences, but rather I would want to focus on things that bring us together as one community of Muslims, rather than going like, oh no, I'm right about this, you're wrong about that. We can rather than agree that, no, we're both kind of at odds about this, but let's kind of keep it less aggressive or less out there and just move on in a way that allows us to move together in the same step. Because there are a lot of things to do still, and they're only possible once you're together rather than if you're apart.
I think emphasizing action is very important, and I think that it's easy for any of us to isolate when we say, oh, well, they're not like me. They're almost like me, but they're not like me, so I can't handle that, and I'm going to back out. And you never even get to a point of conflict or confrontation, much less open conversation and learning and then unity if you self-isolate. And so creating an environment where students don't feel the need to isolate themselves, where they feel like, you know what, I can be a part of this group even if I disagree with my Baptist friend over here. That's what we need to strive to do. And it's difficult, and I know that both you and I have had to go through a lot of individual thinking and processing to get to a place where we're ready to say, I want to contribute to unity rather than to my own self-gratification. But students can get there, and we just need to work to create a space where everybody can go through the process that we've gone through. Azaf, thank you so much for being here. I'm sure you and I will continue to have these conversations. But it's been wonderful chatting with you.
So much,
and I look forward to seeing what happens next here at Dickinson.
Hopefully all well. Thank you so much.
Hi, CSSJ Podcast. It's me, Anna Nasser, and guess what? Jonah gave me a segment, and now you all have to listen to me. This is power I shouldn't have in my hands, but here we are.
And you're saying Jonah should have a podcast?
No, I'm not saying that.
What are you grieving about today, Anna?
What am I grieving about? Well, my bi-weekly segment is going to be the airing of grievances. I have 4 things for us today.
Hit me with the first one.
I'm full of rage over the people who order 2 breakfast sandwiches at Denim Coffee.
Why?
Because why do you need 2 breakfast sandwiches? I get it if you're hungry, man. I get it. I don't want to make you 2 breakfast sandwiches. For context, I am a barista. I work there. I make a lot of breakfast sandwiches. I don't want to make an extra one for you. And then I have to make 2 eggs, and I have to carry it up in those little baggies, and I go, meh, meh, meh. So this is my notice to the people who get 2 breakfast sandwiches at Denim Coffee. You're not as cool as you think you are. Give me less to grieve over. Thank you. On to the next.
What is your second grievance?
My second grievance is people who honk. What are they doing, man? Listen, I'm just walking to class. I've got my little backpack on. I got my jean jacket on. I got my earpods in. I'm listening to a little song. I'm just walking. Prince, Prince, Prince.
And all of a sudden,
honk. What's with that? I understand you want to get my attention, but I'm just a girl. I'm just walking to class. Please don't honk at me. It's even worse when you roll down your window and you yell something, and it's not ever nice.
you're like, okay.
I'm like, thank you. I'm going to Spanish.
I don't know what you want me to do with that information.
Really? For real. So this goes out to the people who honk.
Stop honking. What's your third grievance?
My third grievance was inspired by a conversation we just had.
Oh, no.
About the rat hole.
The rat hole. The Chicago rat hole?
The Chicago rat hole. My grievance is against rat hole haters.
Thank you. Oh, I was afraid your grievance would be against the rat hole.
Oh, no.
And then we couldn't be friends anymore.
I would never do that to you.
I love the rat hole.
As do I.
I'm not a native Chicagoan, but I have lived there since 2018. I consider it my city. I love the rat hole. I worship the rat hole. I received a rat hole-shaped cookie cutter for my birthday and 18 rat hole-shaped cookies with concrete-colored icing, courtesy of my beloved parents, only one of whom listens to this podcast. And I love the rat hole, and I would die for the rat hole.
As would I.
Not
So
to
this
be
goes
dramatic.
out to the people who wouldn't die for the rat hole. What are you doing?
What's your fourth grievance, Anna?
My fourth and final grievance is for our good friend, Jonah Lenahan. Jonah, I forgive you.
This isn't a grievance, this is forgivance.
Well, Jonah, I forgive you. I'd like everyone to know that I forgive Jonah.
I don't think we've ever said on this podcast what Jonah did.
Jonah's just a boy, and he was so excited to be here his freshman year that he plagiarized my paganism posters and made them for the Lutheran student group.
They looked like basically identical.
It was the same. Jonah, you're just a boy. You weren't even a boy then, you were a lad. Truly.
The step before boy is lad.
The step before boy is lad, and you were just a lad, Jonah, and I forgive you.
He was just a lad in the big Carlisle world.
Mm-hmm. So my final grievance isn't really a grievance. It's a forgivance for you, Jonah.
We love you, Jonah.
We love you, Jonah.
I feel like things are going absolutely splendidly right now. It's March, it's almost spring break, we get to report a podcast for work instead of having real jobs. We managed to get the whole staff into one episode. Guys, I'm so proud of this semester.
Molly, it's always so wonderful to have you around to raise our spirits. I don't know where we'd be without someone like you.
Oh, well, Jonah would just read the engaged pages. It's not that hard.
No, Molly, Leslie is right. We need someone uplifting in this office. Note to self, find a new Molly for next fall.
What was that?
Oh, don't worry about it.
He's scheming again. Always scheming, that Lenahan boy with his boy noises.
When do we get to make Cody do the thing?
Right after this. Thanks for tuning in for another episode, loyal listeners. It's always an honor to be here talking about religious life at Dickinson day in and day out, even when the editing sucks.
We wouldn't trade it for the world. The world! Oh, that's what I forgot earlier. Matthew, again, the devil took Jesus to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world in their splendor. All this I will give you, he said, if you will bow down and worship me. And Jesus said to him, Away from me, Satan, for it is written, Worship the Lord your God, and serve him only.
I don't think we can legally end the episode with you quoting scripture to the audience, Jonah.
Come on, Leslie. That's powerful stuff. From the CSSJ, I'm Katerina Sondrowski.
Molly Gunn.
Leslie Mazzino.
Anna Nasser.
And I'm Jonah Lenahan.
Good night.
Good night.
Hey folks, before we wrap up this episode, I just wanted to say a super quick but very heartfelt thank you to our wonderful admin assistant, Ann Maitland, who finished her time at Dickinson this past month. We are going to miss her so much. For those who listened to the third episode on which she was our guest, you know that we all love and adore her, and she truly was and is the heart and soul of Landis House. We wish her the best of luck in all of her future endeavors, and Anne, we love you so much. Thank you for everything you've done for us. Mom away from mom at our home away from home.
And now, a message from the director of the Center for Spirituality and Social Justice.
This episode of the CSSJ Podcast is brought to you by the little clip art illustrations on Engage D pages. Jonah makes his own, but everyone else, you have these stock images to thank. Special thanks to the Tempter for reminding all of us that a good diet takes a lot more than carbs. Additional recognition goes to Antonia Benson, without whom we would be asking not only, why is the religion department library so messy, but also, there's a religion department library? Welcome and thanks to Azaf Shah, a young man whose beard and brains more than rival my own. Thanks to Jonah, Get Behind Me Satan Lenahan for his writing, Leslie, Where's My Stylus Mazzino for their hosting, and Molly, Santa Meets Jesus Gunn for her late-night Engage D scrolling. Special thanks to Anna Needs No Introduction Nasser for her poignant venting, and Katerina Swendrowski for a shocking appearance. Twice. And lastly, thank you to all the listeners, students, and staff. Some of you are up for tenure, and this is how you spend your time?
My question is, if a dog wore pants, how would they wear those pants?
Only on the front two legs. That's the only proper way to wear the pants.
The front two legs?
Yeah, wait.
The front two legs. From the shoulders down.
Isn't it a jacket then?
No, it's pants. Pants. 2 legs, not 4.